Imagine a world where the wealthiest 1% hold all the power, shaping laws, economies, and even our everyday lives. Are we already living in it? President Joe Biden's farewell address left us with a dire warning, but is it too late to turn back? In his parting words as president, Joe Biden highlighted a stark reality: the growing power of the ultra-wealthy. He cautioned against a future where unchecked economic influence could undermine democracy itself. But this isn't the first time the U.S. has faced such a challenge. So, what did Biden say that's sparking heated debates? And why does it matter now more than ever? Today, the wealth gap in America is at its highest point since the Gilded Age. The top 1% controls over 30% of the nation's wealth, while millions struggle with student debt, healthcare costs, and stagnant wages. Biden's warning is clear. Without intervention, this gap could redefine democracy as we know it. But here's the real question: who benefits from this imbalance? From tax loopholes to corporate lobbying, the ultra-wealthy hold tools of influence that most of us can barely comprehend. How did we get here? And is there a way out? This isn't the first time America has faced wealth disparity. During the Great Depression, FDR introduced the New Deal, reshaping the economy to support the working class. But are we ready for another revolutionary shift? Or has the power of the few grown too strong to challenge? The heart of the ordeal lies in answering this. Can the ultra-wealthy be held accountable? Policies like wealth taxes or closing loopholes sound promising, but face fierce opposition. Is the government strong enough or willing to stand up to billionaires who fund campaigns and shape legislation? History shows us the reward of courage. When governments take bold action, they can create more equitable systems. Imagine an America where healthcare, education, and opportunities are accessible to all, not just the privileged few. Could Biden's message inspire the next wave of change? But here's the twist: Biden isn't just leaving behind a warning, he's passing the torch. The question now isn't whether the ultra-wealthy have power, it's whether we, the people, are willing to challenge it. Are you ready to be part of the change? What happens in America doesn't stay in America. The world is watching. How will this chapter of history be written? And more importantly, who will write it? Do you believe Biden's warning is valid? What should we do to create a fairer society? Comment below, share your thoughts, and let's start a conversation about the future we want to build. While Biden's warning resonates with many, it also faces criticism. Is it the government's responsibility to intervene, or should the free market be left to run its course? Let's weigh the arguments. Supporters of wealth redistribution argue that extreme inequality destabilizes economies and societies. They point to countries like Denmark and Sweden, where higher taxes on the wealthy fund universal health care and education. But could such policies work in the United States? And at what cost? Would you accept higher taxes if it meant free healthcare for all? Or is there another way to close the gap? Critics argue that government intervention risks stifling innovation and growth. They point to failed socialist experiments as examples of how redistributive policies can backfire. Is there a middle ground that avoids the pitfalls of overreach while addressing inequality? How much power should the government have over private wealth? Where do we draw the line? Another argument in favor of reform is holding corporations accountable. Lobbying scandals and tax loopholes allow the ultra-wealthy to influence policies while paying less than their fair share. Should corporations be taxed based on their global revenues? Could this level the playing field? What's fairer? Taxing corporations heavily or incentivizing them to reinvest in communities? Opponents argue that higher corporate taxes will push businesses offshore, leading to job losses and slower growth. They believe a thriving economy depends on incentivizing corporations to innovate and expand. Could deregulation be the answer instead of stricter tax laws? Are we risking economic collapse by overregulating? Or is it time to rethink capitalism? This debate isn't just about America, it's about the global economy. When the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. From emerging markets to established economies, wealth inequality is a global challenge. Can international cooperation, like global corporate taxes, help fix the problem? Should global wealth inequality be addressed at the national level, or does it require a united global effort? Looking back, history teaches us that societies with extreme inequality often face unrest. From the French Revolution to the Civil Rights Movement, inequality has been a catalyst for change. Could we be on the brink of another transformative era? What lessons from history should we apply to today's challenges? The question remains, where do you stand? Should we heed Biden's warning and push for systemic reform, or is the answer found in preserving the free market? Share your thoughts below, and let's continue this important conversation. The future isn't written. It's up to us to shape it. Let's step back for a moment and dive deeper. What does systemic reform even look like? And how might a fairer society function in practical terms? To answer these questions, we need to explore the mechanics of wealth distribution and why inequality persists. To understand the challenge, we must first grasp how wealth becomes concentrated. In the United States, the top 1% controls about 30% of the country's wealth, while the bottom 50% owns just 2%. Why? Because wealth generates more wealth. Investments, tax advantages, and the compounding nature of capital ensure that those at the top continue to grow their fortunes exponentially. Take Jeff Bezos, for instance. His net worth isn't just from his salary, it's from stock ownership and the growth of Amazon. By comparison, someone earning a median income often spends the majority of their paycheck on housing, healthcare, and other necessities, leaving little room for savings or investments. One proposed solution is reforming the tax code. Historically, the US had much higher tax rates for the wealthy. In the 1950s, the top income tax bracket was 91%. Today, it's 37%. Lower taxes on the wealthy mean fewer resources for public goods like education, infrastructure, and healthcare. In countries like Sweden and Denmark, progressive tax systems ensure that the wealthiest contribute more. These revenues fund universal healthcare, free education, and generous social safety nets, leading to lower poverty rates and higher life satisfaction. But can such a model work in a country as large and diverse as the United States? Another factor is the role of corporations. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 reduced corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%, with the idea that companies would reinvest the savings into jobs and higher wages. But in many cases, that didn't happen. Instead, corporations spent billions on stock buybacks to boost shareholder value. Apple, for instance, repurchased $85.5 billion worth of its stock in 2021 alone. While this benefits investors, it doesn't necessarily translate to wage increases or new jobs for the average worker. But this isn't just about numbers. It's about people. Economic inequality often leads to disparities in education, healthcare, and even life expectancy. A study by the Brookings Institution found that people in the wealthiest 20% of U.S. counties live, on average, 6 years longer than those in the poorest 20%. Think about that. Your zip code, something entirely out of your control, can determine how long you live. Is this the kind of society we want to pass on to future generations? There are no simple answers, but the debate often centers on two key ideas: regulation and innovation. Advocates for regulation argue that wealth taxes, closing loopholes, and limiting corporate lobbying can create a more level playing field. On the other hand, proponents of free markets believe that fostering innovation and competition will naturally lead to better opportunities for everyone. Look at Silicon Valley. Some argue that minimal regulation allowed it to thrive, creating technologies that changed the world. Others point out that the concentration of wealth and power in tech giants like Google and Meta now stifles competition. History offers valuable lessons. During the Great Depression, FDR's New Deal introduced sweeping reforms, from Social Security to public works projects. These policies didn't eliminate inequality, but they did provide a safety net that lifted millions out of poverty. Could we see a modern equivalent? The challenges may differ, but the idea remains. Bold action and collective effort can create safety nets that uplift millions. It's not just about policies, it's about the choices we make together. The actions we take today, as voters, leaders, or advocates, shape the world we leave behind. Change begins with awareness and dialogue, and it's up to us to keep it alive. So, where do you stand? What role will you play in building a fairer society? Share your thoughts below, and let's keep the conversation going. The future starts with us. If this video inspired you, like, subscribe, and share.